thank you so much for being here today. My name is Asa Hiramatsu. I am the director of SEIZAN Gallery. It is very exciting to have all three exhibiting artists to have this very special occasion for the talk. And if you want to just, come forward, feel free. I just want to introduce each speaker today. Marina Berio is a New York-based interdisciplinary artist presenting charcoal drawings made between 2007 and 2012, alongside newly created gum bichromate print based on her family photographs. Aya Fujioka is a photographer from Hiroshima, Japan. She is showing selected prints from her newly published photo book, Life Studies. Copies are available here. And the works were taken in New York between the late 2000s and 2010 when she was living in the city. Asa Hiramatsu is a painter based in Tokyo whose oil paintings depict inner images and quiet dreamlike forms. This exhibition marks her first presentation outside Japan. Thank you. Moderator today is Pauline Vermare, the Philip and Edith Leonian Curator of Photography at Brooklyn Museum, whose work often explores dialogue between Japanese and international photography, as well as other visual and cultural mediums. Please join me in welcoming Pauline and the others.
Thank you so much, Sayaka. And thank you very much, all three of you, for being here, and to you, to our translator today. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be back. And in fact, just to start this conversation, I just want to link back to the last conversation that we had here, thanks to Sayaka, which was about Saul Leiter and Paul Auster, painter, photographer, and a novelist, who very much worked on the sort of liminal spaces as well, and on the question of chance with street photography or with literature. And I think with this conversation that Sayaka initiated, and with this group of artists, I think this is what we want to talk about today, is what's in between photography and painting, and the practice itself and the process of creation. So I look forward to this conversation. And so I'll speak a little bit with each of the artists first, ask them to tell me a little bit about their practice, the bodies of work that we see here. But my first question is really to Sayaka, whose gallery we're in, and who had the idea of presenting these three artists in this show. And I'd like to ask Sayaka, what was the thread that she saw in those three bodies of work?
Thank you, Pauline. Because I don't have a curatorial background, so when I choose artists for a group show, it's coming very intuitive, And but first we knew we wanted to put Asa's work in a group show because we're gonna have a solo show planned next year for her, and I knew Aya's book is coming this last month, so I'm like, I thought, it would be a good timing to put their works together, and I thought it's going to be a good dialogue. And then I thought I need the third artist, probably female, but someone from here. And then, thanks to you, Pauline, you introduced me to Marina's work, and when I did a studio visit with her, I thought, I found the third artist missing piece, because her work is based on photography but going towards painting. It's perfect fit. And then the word Awai came up during the conversation with Asa, and in between liminal space, that's a perfect fit to thread to three artists.
Well, thank you. I think the show is beautiful, and I can see the thread very clearly. I hope you all will spend time with all the works here, and there's something quite homogeneous in a way, as much as they all are very different in terms of medium, in terms of voice, and I think clearly we are in a space of connection. And so I'm going to ask my first question to Marina, also because I've known Marina the longest. We met at ICP at the International Center of Photography years ago, where we both worked. And I've followed Marina's practice for at least, I would say 15 years maybe, and I know you as a photographer, and I see the works here, and the question I'd like to ask you is about the practice and maybe the more experimental work, because I'd be very curious to know how you actually decided to go that route in the sort of experimentation and how you created those works.
Thank you. And thank you, Sayaka, and everybody from the gallery for today. So I have two different bodies of work here, but they are sort of like two different sides of the same coin, essentially photographs that look like drawings and drawings that look like photographs. The drawings are traced photographic negatives, and so the word experimentation fits them a little bit less than it does with the gum bichromate prints, which are really like hacking into a 19th century process and injecting a modern sensibility of materials awareness and conceptual sort of thinking. But they both evolved quite slowly. So in both cases, the first tests were made years before I really sort of delved. And so for me, experimentation is a little bit of a funny word because it's used, I think, quite broadly to denote any work that's not mainstream practice, right? But it doesn't quite fit, for example, the drawings because there's a strong tradition of photorealist drawing and painting, right? But I do think that these drawings could only have been made by a photographer, right? And the gum bichromates are, something else entirely. It's a very difficult process, but to inject these materials like chlorophyll, blood, etc., is a way of sort of, and that was experimental because I needed to figure out the recipes and a lot of work went into those.
And so can you just tell us a little bit, so there are two, and some are more recent, in fact so recent,
yes,
and some are older. Your son is featured in one of the, just behind here on one.
Yes.
Can you tell us just a little bit about your practice, I would say, maybe how do you then define yourself, and you teach also, so how do you
I'm a photographer who draws, as important and central as these drawings were for many years. I've come back to photography now, and my current work is photographic. In terms of time, so the drawings, as Sayaka said, these are 2007 to 2012. I had begun the very first ones in 1998, 99. They went into a drawer, they stayed there for years, and then I pulled them out, and then I put them back in the drawer, and then they came out, a few times. That's how I tend to work. 2012 is more or less the end. That's when I transitioned to a photographic project about the walls of my studio. And the gum bichromates, maybe fittingly because they're sort of about cycle of life, the pictures of my son date from 2000. The very first photograph we took of him after he came out of my body, literally like on the contact sheet. I could see the first one, right, because you could see them in order. And then these were taken a few years later, but the idea of printing family images with real-world materials didn't come until later. And so I started printing work with my own blood in 2014. And then these three I just made like 2 weeks ago at home in my kitchen and bathroom. So, and my son's name is Elio, which is the word for son, S-U-N in Greek. So there's sort of like, he's the son of two photographers. So it's all, yeah.
Thank you. And then we're going to come back to the idea of this cycle and the in-betweenness once we have a conversation amongst yourselves. But so now I would like to ask Asa about her practice.
Maybe before I start to talk about my paintings, we can share the point of view of Awai, so you can express a little bit about the country, and after that I can
Sounds good. So I printed the kanji for Awai so that everybody knows how it spells. and I'm also including a Japanese friend yesterday was sent me another kanji thinking it was spelling a different way. I said, I don't understand how to, but it's this kanji which can be read many different ways. And I studied Japanese in university, and I was saying, when you learn how to write, they tell you what the key, anyway, so that's the gate, and that's the sun. And anyway, I was saying just symbolically, just the way it spells already says quite a lot, but I'd love for it also the Japanese artists in this group to tell us, and of course Sayaka, obviously, because you came up also with the expression, to talk about what you meant also when you proposed this for tag.
I start. Okay. So in my point of view, Awai means something very soft and softer than between. But if I translate Awai into English directly, it's just in between. And so imagine that there are two glasses here to drink a water. Yeah, for example, so glasses. So this is the between. There are two glasses and there is a blank here. But in my point of view, so I got two leaves. I'm not sure you can talk about Awai in my point of view. So like this, there are two leaves here, like this. So the Awai moves, it depends on where the leaves, exist. So if the wind blows, the leaves goes, to the right, to the left. So the Awai is moving. So I like that concept. So when I talk about Awai, and so this is my painting. So I usually paint clouds in my paintings. So cloud is one of my main motifs to show these things. So that means that the clouds never stop in the sky. So when we talk to you for a minute, and when we look up into the sky, the clouds is different, from the shape is different from the before, 1 minute ago. So I like this concept, So maybe I'm Japanese, so I'm easily to understand about what Awai is. So I don't want to set. I don't want to fix the cloud in the sky. I like to follow the movement. So that's why, the clouds is my important motif inside it. And also the seasons, it always moves. This is my Awai. Yeah.
And that's, I was just earlier watching that interview I mentioned to you, but of Paulos, just talking about where his work was creating what space between control and the accident, between what you can control and what you cannot control, and that's where fiction, especially, or art really is created. And I feel like when I look at your clouds, and they're so precise, especially if you look at the little one there on the left with the tiny little shadow underneath. So there's a lot of precision and control, but so when I was asking you about your process, could you describe actually when you're painting, this sort of space between control and accident, or how do you project yourself onto, onto the canvas personally?
So to compare the contrast with the photographs, like Asa's work, like that. So in the photographs, everything is real. I would say that. So, but in the painting, I can take the clouds, close to me. So it's free. So I would say that I can control the clouds, but I don't pressure. No, I didn't press. No. So in this way, I want to be soft. To control my motif, and I always try to talk about another me inside. So somebody is existing inside me. So I try to talk to her or him. I don't know, but in this way, the cloud is always kind to me, and he or she helps me a lot. So I don't control, but maybe clouds controls me, and that's why.
Can you look just a little bit more about the idea of the cloud and the fact that you are the symbol, the symbolic, and is it something that is, I feel like it's in the press release, maybe that there's a quote and you say that you yourself identify a little bit with the...
I wanted to be a cloud when I was a kid because, when I was a kid, I on the land. I was born in Tokyo and I was raised in Tokyo, and there are so many people and so crowded like in New York City. And even I was a kid, and it was too loud for me, and I wanted to stay in the silence. So I always said to my mom that I wanted to be a cloud, I want to go up into the sky. So that's, at the time, I didn't know that painter could be the occupation. So, but now, the clouds is one of my originality, because when I was a kid, I didn't know about occupation as a painter. So I want to keep my originality, so even if I'm mature. So, yeah. Thank you. Still, I want to be proud.
Yes. Yes. So, we met a month ago. We met thanks to Sayaka at the Brooklyn Museum a year ago, I'd say that is about. I had been working on a book on Japanese women photographers that Aya was part of, and we met at the museum, and then we met again in Tokyo a month ago because, it was for the Gendai Festival, which is a contemporary art fair, and we were in conversation. So I learned a lot about Aya then, including the fact that she was very much influenced or inspired or prompted by Cartier-Bresson's work, which is where I came from, the Cartier-Bresson Foundation, and so we had conversations about this. And then when I met Aya a month ago, the book was about to come out. The book, yes, this one, her book, Life Studies. And so it's such a joy to see it, because I had only seen the postcard at the cover. And so it's out, and Aya has, I think, 3 shows at the moment, one in Tokyo, one here, and one in London, is it? Yeah, so congratulations, Aya, for everything that you've been accomplishing these days. And I would love, of course, to talk about to you, for you to tell us about this book in particular, and this body of work that is on the walls. You'll see the work if you haven't yet in the back right here. And the sort of street photography that's very literary, and the text, because the book is photographs and text. And so what I'd love for you to tell us about is the idea that those photos were made in New York when you lived here, maybe 13 years ago now, about 10, 13 years ago. And that, again, space in between, the moment you made those photographs and the moment the book comes out, now that you're back in Japan. Can you talk a little bit about the photos themselves, what they are, what you were, but also the process of the book making?
今日はニューヨークから出て、13年経つんですけれども、私がニューヨークにいた5年間ほど、お世話になったというか、その頃の友達がここにたくさん来てくれていて、ちょっとすごく緊張していて、こうやって写真家として帰ってくることができて、本当に胸がいっぱいというか、自分でどういうふうにその頃のことを思いを伝えればいいのかと思ってたのでね、すごく今日は素晴らしい通訳の方がいらっしゃるので、ちょっと日本語でお礼を伝えたいですけれども。
So as introduced, I'm happy to be back here in New York. It was about 13 years ago that these works were made. I spent time here for about 5 years, and many of my friends from that time have come out here today. So I'm suddenly quite nervous to be in front of everyone. So I am just filled with emotion, and I don't know, as a photographer, how to express what I'm feeling. So I'm really thinking about how to do that, but I do have a wonderful interpreter beside me, and she's going to help, and I will be speaking in Japanese. First, I'd like to thank everyone for it.
その5年間っていうのは、なんていうか、ここに来てる友達、私が写真家だっていうことをそれほど知らない人もいるんじゃないかって思うぐらいなんですけど、その 写真をやりたいと思ってニューヨークに来たはずなんですけど、その生活をしている中でなんていうか写真よりももっと切実なものが私の中にあって、でなんか写真っていうのは本当に退屈な時に写真を撮ってたような気持ちでも、その退屈な時に何か撮ってたものが今こういうふうになんかこう一つにまとまってるような気がするんですよね。で
So again, the 5 years I spent here in New York, I think some of the friends that have got here today might not even know that I was a photographer, that I was taking pictures during that time. I came to New York, or I should have come to New York with the intention of taking photos and being a photographer. But once here, I realized that there were more pressing issues to me in my life within myself than photos themselves. And that I found myself taking photographs during times when maybe I was idle or a little bit bored. These are the times when I was taking pictures. And that seems to be the compilation of what is being exhibited here today. And
そうですね、だからここニューヨークに来て何を撮ればいいのかとか、そのどうすれば写真家になれるのかとかってことも全然わからなくて、とにかく手探りでなんか生活をしていたようなところがあって、でそんななんかこう宙に浮いたような自分もすごくこう嫌だったというか、もうとにかくストラグルしていたっていう感じでもあるんですけれども、それでニューヨークのことがすごく好きで、いつまでももっといたいというふうに思いながらも、日本に帰ることになって、でなんか本当に写真っていうのが自分にとって一体何なのか、本当にこれをやり続けていけるのかっていうふうな迷いがずっと持ちながら来ていて、今でも本当にこれから先もできるのかどうなのかっていう確実な革新的なことはないんですけれども、日本に帰って、ずっとニューヨークの写真展を何回かしたんですけれども、なかなかこう複雑すぎてまとめることができなかったんですよね、この13年間で、本当にやっと編集作業を何回も繰り返して、やっとできたという感じですかね。もっと本当に早くにできるはずだったんですけど、広島に帰って広島の作品を作ったことがきっかけで、先に広島が作品が出たということもあって、それでちょっとなんていうかニューヨークのことを13年経って冷静にもう一回見ることができたような気がします。
So you want to show the book?
And then I'll talk about that portion. So in terms of when I came to New York, I wasn't sure what I should shoot or how to even become a photographer. I was really groping to figure out these things. I was just sort of floating and trying to get a sense of that. So I have to say that it was a struggle and it wasn't the most pleasant time for me. But I really do, I loved and I do love New York, and I felt like I wanted to stay. But the time came that I had to return to Japan, so I did. But in terms of when I went home as well, I was thinking about what photographs meant to me, what I should be taking, what I should be shooting, and can I continue being a photographer? These were things that were always percolating throughout my head, and even today, I still think I don't know if I can do this going forward. I don't have certainty in regard to that. But I did return to Japan, as I said, and I had come back to New York many times for various exhibitions. But in terms of these particular works, they were just a bit too complicated in terms of gathering them and putting together an exhibition, which is why we're here now, 13 years later. I think finally it was the process I had to go through. There was a lot of editing that I did to get to this point where I was able to do it. Perhaps I should have been able to do it a bit earlier or faster. But I actually did go back home to Hiroshima. I was working on a collection of works focused on Hiroshima. So that was something that I was able to exhibit ahead of the current exhibition. But I do think that in regard to New York, thanks to the 13 years that have elapsed, I do have time to look at my works anew a bit more calmly and clearly.
Thank you. That's something that you and Marina have in common, I feel. The sort of coming and going and spending time with the body of work and then leaving it alone and then coming back to it. Because the Hiroshima book, which is here, by the way, Here Goes River, was also made. It took a long time also to make?
5 years.
Yeah, so a little less long. So now, I'd love to have a conversation maybe more broadly with you, the three of you, about the concept, the idea of Awai and the nature of the in-betweenness. And maybe this is a question for Marina also about the fact that you also are Japanese through your mother. What's your relationship, and would you say that it actually nourished your work at all?
Yes. I was sort of born in a liminal space because my father was Italian, my mother is Japanese American, and because of my father's work, I traveled a lot. There was a lot of awareness of international sort of landscapes, and I've gone through life with this sort of weird situation where the foreignness that's on my face is not the foreignness I have inside, because people see me as Asian, but that's my American side, and actually my white side is what's inside, and that's the foreign part. So it's a little bit flipped around, and so there's always a conversation. It's something I've had to sort of deal with my whole life, and I don't remember when I realized it was coming out of my work. Probably 20 years ago. But this idea of floating back and forth between media, for sure. There was a body of work I had done around 2001 with drawings, sort of photographing the Scratchy and the ferries in New York, which is so much about traveling from place to place, and also New York is this place of immigration. So in one form or another, it's come in, always. But interestingly, this is the first time, I'm 59, and this is my first time showing in a Japanese space, in any sort of Japanese context. I was in a residency once, but that's the only time otherwise, so it's quite a new experience, actually, to have to confront this directly.
Yes. And since COVID, the conversations we were having were actually about the body of work that you showed recently about the internment camps and your family history. And can you talk a little bit about the letter?
Definitely. So that is also a big departure from my previous work. There are copies here, so if people want to look at them. It's not art that goes on the wall. It's a letter that I wrote to Roosevelt about the fact that he incarcerated my family. My grandparents, my great-grandparents, and my mother was born in camp, and my aunt remembers camp. So it's an angry letter, and it's also written from the point of view of a photo teacher. So looking at pictures, how they function, who saw them, who didn't. There are places where pictures were never even able to be taken. And it's totally different from anything else I've ever done. But that also has brought me much closer to that side of my family.
Right. And it was very personal. Yes, we can see the letter being but so, and that's the first time we were talking about Japan, I think, you and me.
Yeah.
Before. And so
you told me your family's story.
Right.
Because we both have the sort of international stepmother and other, a lot of.
Yeah, there was a lot, in fact, in between of mirroring somehow. But so it's interesting to hear from you how it had this back and forth cultural and identity-wise has nourished your work as well. Because I feel like, and maybe Asa, also you traveled. I know it was not necessarily it was in America, was it in Australia that you traveled?
No, I was in Brisbane in Australia, but to learn English.
Right.
When I was 19 years old. That's it.
But then you stayed here, and so that's a connection we have with Asa that was before we met, is the Steinberg Foundation, because you did come here at some point, was it 2 years ago?
2 years ago, yes.
And in the Steinberg studio. Can you talk to us a little bit about that moment and what you were doing there?
I wrote an essay about his painting, because you know that a songwriter was painter as well. No, he was well known as a photographer, but he is a painter. So that's why the Songwriter Foundation wanted to me write an essay, because a songwriter collected a lot of Japanese art books, so including like tea ceremony, like a Japanese gardens or hokusai or any kinds of Japanese art. So that's why they wanted to ask a Japanese artist to understand about his paintings. So I was chosen. So I stayed in the studio and I talked to the member of the Songwriter Foundation. Yeah. And at the same time, when I was traveling, I always with the sketchbooks. So I tried to see Songwriter, but he passed away, as you know. But I tried to find his hidden existence in the studio. And he was right there on the chair, one chair, and I tried to talk to him, and I, tried to take some energy from him, and I tried to talk. But my way is the painting, so I tried to talk to him through the painting, and I believed that we had a very nice conversations in the sketchbooks. Really, yes.
Yes, yes.
So that was very good time, and to get to know about the life in New York City, because Songwriter lives in East Village, and he just took a lot of photographs on the street, and he didn't go far away, so just 10 minutes walk from the East Village. So he stayed there, but he was New York City, like a city boy, but he didn't go to travel, So, so it was nice time for me, enough time to understand about him, if I stayed in East Village and inside the studio.
And that's something I think that when we talk about this liminal space, it's a lot about also the conversations between cultures. I also did a beautiful project about Ireland, about Gulliver's Travel. And I think that's how I first met, Asa. That's when I first saw your paintings, was, I think maybe the Soleil showed it to me. Can you talk a little bit about this Gulliver's Travel? I think we have it here too.
Yeah, and I did the illustrations for Gulliver's Travel. So that was a series in the newspaper, one of the very famous newspaper in Japan, which is Asahi Shimbun. And I did like about 85 illustrations, so which was for two years. So it was a quite long time. So this is satire novels, Gulliver's Travels. So there are a lot of meaning hidden in the novels. So, for example, so there is one person in the novels, and the swift means like, 登場人物がたくさんいるときに、そのある政治家を名指しで登場人物を使って風刺したりするとか、いろんな風刺が含まれている。
So this is a work that comprises a lot of satire. There's a multitude of characters that appear, but it might be a case where there's, let's say, a certain politician that's named, but it's evoked to be a certain character.
Yeah. So in this way, I put a lot of meanings in one painting, so the readers try to understand about the novel through the painting. So it was a very nice project for me. And I had to learn about the history as well. So for 2 years, I didn't have any shows in Japan, so I just concentrated on this project.
And the goal is to show it in Ireland soon, right?
Yeah, and in next year, 2026, would be the 300th anniversary since the first published was, So I tried my best to do my show in Dublin or maybe. Yeah. So I like to travel a lot, and I like to understand about a lot of cultures. So I like to be maybe in between. Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, and that's something that I also, when I was reading yesterday, so at the end of the book, there's a beautiful text that's in Japanese, so you have to, I think it's going to be translated. Sayaka, I think it's working on it, but it's really beautiful. It's really a proper short story. A short story. That's kind of about the work, about the photographs, but not exactly. It's really certainly about those years that you made those photographs and a few encounters. And I love what you said at the end. The last sentence, I think, is half of it is true and half of it is not. And I think that what's beautiful for the three of you in what you do is that, of course, and I suppose for any artist, a lot is biographical, autobiographical. A lot comes from who you are and who you were, if I may, like your family, who came before you. But also those experiences of being abroad or even just inside of your head, not being quite in the place that you're physically in. And so the photos that you can see here are, for me, extraordinary because I know they come from Cartier-Bresson in the sense that you say that's who made you want to make those photographs, one of the people, I'm sure. But they're so different because they're a little, I would say they're a little maybe more dark, not in a, I don't know, it's not a darkness that is ominous, but it's a darkness in that I can sense that the whole of your personality, you know, every photo says something that's much deeper than what we see, like the forks on the floor, and they are so beautiful aesthetically, but they're also, they carry a lot of meaning. So could you talk a little bit about this, about how you make your photographs? And I know it's a chance and I know it's control, so can you talk about that space in between also, what you control and what you don't?
なんかもちろんその学生の頃からブレッソンとかエグルストンとかとにかくその、写真をすごい人の写真を見てきてなんかこう決定的瞬間自分はその何かモーメントをつかみ取りたいっていう風な気持ちがあってでただそれをするのはすごくこういつもこう見ていないといけないっていうで見ていても出会わないと撮れないっていうでそんな時にやっぱりなんか無意味を打っているようなところがあったんですよ。それで無意味を打ちながらそのこんなことして何になるこれを撮って何になるんだろうみたいなことがありながらそれが逆になんかその13年後のその自分がもう一回見た時に何かこうその淡いというか自分がこういうふうなものを撮りたいと思っているものでないものとその自分がその無意味を打っているようにこうなんていうか鬱屈した自分のがいてそこの淡いのようなものがその編めたらいいなみたいなことは思っていてその、文章に関しては、写真なんて本当にすごい簡単なんですよね。なんかシャッターをすごい映るようなものなんですけど文章はここになんかすごい方がいらっしゃるってなかなかあれですけど本当に時間がかかってでただなんかその今言ったように写真が誰でも撮れるようなこの時代にその、なんとかもう一回その文章を読んでもう一回写真を見るようなことができないだろうかっていうふうなその私にとってのすごいチャレンジだったと思います。
So of course, when I was a student, I did admire amazing photographers and looked at their work, whether it was Cartier-Bresson or Eggleston. And this is something that at the time I thought, when the decisive moment comes, when I want to seize that moment, I had to think about what I wanted to shoot. So I was always thinking of what that would have to be. I was always having to look, but it's not just looking, it's that you also have to have the encounter of what you're going to take. So there were definitely times where I took things that maybe were not as meaningful or meaningless. So at that time, I would be thinking, what is this going to become, or what is this for? And I think the chance of having these 13 years to look back on what I had taken, it's another chance especially in the context of Awai that we're talking about in terms of what I wanted to take, maybe even if it wasn't exactly what I wanted to shoot or something that maybe was meaningless.
ニューヨークではなんていうかやっぱり街に出ればすごい楽しいんですけどやっぱ孤独であったんですよね。ですごい自分がなるべき道みたいなものがなかなかなんていうかビザというかなんかなんていうのかななんかちゃんとしたステータスを持ってないし働いてもいないでなんていうかじゃあ写真家としてちゃんとここでやってるかってそうでもないすごく宙に浮いた感じの自分がいてで、だからすごいニューヨークっているって言ってすごい華やかなように見えるけど結構自分の中では鬱屈していた。ただここに来てる友達がとかお世話になった方がいて自分はすごい幸せでニューヨークのこと大好きではあるんだけれどもなんかどっちかというと街に愛されたいというふうには思っていたわけですよ。
So when we think about New York, of course it's a fun city. You can have a good time here, but there's also the feeling of isolation that I had when I was here, sort of being alone, and in terms of what I was supposed to become. I didn't have a particular status in terms of my visa. I wasn't necessarily working, and I wasn't really officially a photographer. I was sort of just floating through space while I was here, and I think that there's an image of the city as being sort of glamorous and exciting, glorious place, but it was a bit depressing for me during that time. Of course, a lot of my great friends, some of whom are here today, took care of me, and thanks to them, I had a good time. But this was a challenge that I really experienced. So in terms of the text portion that you were talking about, this was something that I think is quite different from shooting. For me, photography is something that's simple. You press the shutter and you take a picture. But in terms of creating the words that accompanied the photos, this really took a lot of time. This is something we're in this time where anyone can take a picture. That's the time that we're in. But I think that in the context of that, I was able to look at the text and read the sentences, and that enabled me to once again look at the meaning of the photos that I had. But that was the challenge that I was facing in terms of compiling this book. And one addition to was that I had the friends earlier, the New York portion, who really took good care of me. But I think during that time when I was sort of floating and felt lost and isolated, I really wanted to be loved by New York as a city. That was another feeling that I had.
I would like to share my Japanese point of view. So please allow me to, as a Japanese, sorry. 永遠の今っていう多分仏教が前かちょっとごめんなさいはっきり言えないけれどっていう言葉があって今と永遠ってすごく違うだけどモーメントと forever っていうのは違うんだけれども、その日本のエクスプレッションの中では同じなんでしょう永遠と今がイコールっていうのがあってで今っていうモーメントはなんかパールのネックレスみたいな感じで今 now present そう全部のそれぞれの今が forever っていう解釈があるのですごく写真を撮るときモーメントだけれどそこに写真の中に入るとそれが永遠であるしちょっと辛かった鬱屈してた時が今でもなんか全ての今に永遠が詰まってるから肯定するというかそういう日本の多分考え方なのかなと思うんですけどそれはすごくなんかニューヨークの皆さんとシェアしたいなと思います。
So there's a Buddhist Zen concept called the eternal now. And what this describes is that you have the two concepts of now and forever. Let's say this particular moment and then the concept of forever. The eternal now speaks to the concept that those are the same. the moment and forever. They're actually equal in terms of the interpretation or the standing. So if we're talking about now as a certain moment, when we talk about taking photographs, of course when you take the actual picture, that's the moment. But when you look at the picture, as Asa was saying, that itself is forever, because by looking at her photos, she can go back to the time when she was struggling and when she was feeling depressed. That's something that is the forever aspect of that particular piece of work. If we think about the multiple moments, it can be like a pearl necklace of now is how it's comprised. And we have all these respective different moments that can be interpreted as the now. But when you put them all together within each moment, you have that concept of forever. And it sort of affirms that. I think this might be a Japanese concept, so I want to share it with all the New Yorkers here.
でもね、私としてはね、写真になってしまえばいくつも何も、どうでもよくなるというか、やっぱりものがある最後に何か自分の写真になるっていうことが撮ってなければ何もならないんですけど、撮っていたからこそ今こうやってなんていうかものとしてあるっていうことがすごい。なんか哲学的なこととは別になんかそんな風なことを思っていて。
So for photos, if you're in the midst of depression, whatever you're feeling, once you take the photograph, that's something that you can sort of get past, or it ends up being okay. Because in the end, you have this photograph, it becomes an actual thing. If you don't take it, then it becomes nothing materializes. But if you do take this photo, it becomes an actual item or a thing. I'm not talking about it in the philosophical sense, but that's just what I think.
But it may be more in a psychoanalytical sense. And I was going to ask actually Marina, because Marina has been a teacher also for many years, and I wonder in your practice as a teacher, because I know how much work you've spent, and I know how loved you are by the students who had you and have you as a teacher. How do you deal with that aspect that is so deeply personal of photography? Of course, painting also, but in this case, thinking about the moments then you are done and then you use your camera, you use your practice. Sometimes it's camera-less photographs, but how do you, as a professional, as an artist and as a professional educator, what do you want to convey to your students? How can photography be used in that sense?
Thank you for that question. I was going to speak to the now and the endless, but I think with students it's about creating a safe space in which change can occur, and that maybe ties back to this question of the now and the endless, because in any liminal space you have this movement. You drop the leaves, right, and that space in between the leaves changes as the leaves fall, and if we're all three committed to working in liminal spaces, it's because it gives us a little bit of freedom to move. With my students, I work very hard on creating safety. We do movements together. We talk about trust. We talk about how to sort of deal in the group with bringing difficult content into the classroom, which always happens in any photo program, and then that content is either treated respectfully or not. So one of the things that I like to tell them is that I hope that I'm not just sort of, and I also stay away from value judgments in my teaching. Not this is a good picture, this is a bad picture, but how is it operating, and how does it lead you forward to the rest of the work?
And of the life, right? I feel like this is what Aya was also talking about when she's making a photograph. You're not necessarily thinking about beauty or values, but it's the moment you are personally in that moment.
Right.
Tell me, Sayaka, at which moment, because I'd love to ask if anyone has questions in the audience, but I don't want to, is now a good moment to ask? Yeah? Would anybody like to say something? Or to comment? It doesn't have to be a question, just to take part in the conversation.
For Fujioka Sensei, if you could expand one of the pieces in the show into a, say, 10-15 minute short film, which one would it be and why?
Excuse me?
Thank you.
well, maybe to
Just
use it
one
at the
image,
basis
and
of a
why
story.
would you want to expand it into short film?
短編の形で、いや、スライドショーでこう全部こう見せたいと思いますけど、なんか短編映画の形で、つながらないといけないから、なんだろう。
I think the question, I would like to ask you this question, which one do you think could make You would have to go back?
I have to go back.
Yeah, that's But I appreciate your question because I was also saying to you, Aya, before the talk, that I feel like each of your photographs is a short story for me, and I think that's maybe what you're saying also. But I don't think that Aya's function in this world is to make us feel this way, I think. Right? But the text at the end of the book, I feel is a short film made from each and every one of them, something like this.
なんかその、なんていうか、まあ、事実、まあ、写真ってその事実が写っている、その事実を使ってなんか虚構を作りたいみたいな気持ちがあって、だからなんかこういつもこう写真集作るときはこう並びを考えながらそのどうやったら騙せるのかっていうことを考えながら作って何を騙すんですか？なんだろう、まあ、自分もその、まあ、さっき写していたニューヨークっていうキラキラしたものが自分より遠くにあったっていうふうに思っていたけれども、それはなんかその自分の手の中でこう変えていくことができるっていう、まあ、それと同時に、まあ、文章もなんか半分嘘半分本当っていうふうな自分のことをこう、まあ、虚構を作りたいっていう感じです。虚構はね、物語というか。
So in terms of that, when we're talking about photographs, it's factual. It's a factually based media, but at the same time, I also want to create fiction or a story through my works, and in that way, I'd like to sort of maybe trick or deceive viewer. And then Asa-san said, "Who are you trying to trick?" And she said it's also self-deception in the sense that when I was in New York. I was talking about the city being bright and sparkly, but this was so far away from the existence that I had within it. But I also felt that within my own hand, there was something that I could do. There was a thing that I could change. So at the same time, and this is true in regards to the sentence that you're talking about, it's half true, it's half false. But because within that is the story or the fiction that I want to create.
I have a question. Were they all shot at the same time? Were the two, they're all placed together, were they all shot at the same time?
私の作品
The ones displayed here?
Yeah, in the room.
はい、2007年から2012年の5年前です。
It was during the 5-year span from 2007 to 2012.
So she wasn't shooting, the narrative came afterwards, but she wasn't making the putting things together.
そう、編集するときに
Yes, I thought about it during the editing process.
Because I felt that from a formal point of view, for example, the forks on the floor and the check of the arm of the fabric. So to me there was a narrative imagination of one of these two connect with a story, but also there's a visual connection between the white and the white and the grid. So
そうですね、なんか意味がないから、その視覚同士で組んでいくっていうことをします。
Yes, because there is no meaning to it, it's what I do is the combining of the visuals.
で、なんかそれを見る人が勝手に物語を作っていけばいいというか、こういうふうに絶対見てほしいというのはないので。
And the person viewing the work can create their own story. It's not that I'm absolute in terms of what it has to be.
で、この広島に関しては自分の物語を作らないように作っていったっていうところがあって、だから今回のそのライフスタディーズとこの広島の作品っていうのはもう全然こう私の中で意識して違う感じに に作ったというふうに思っています。
So there's a contrast with my work on the Hiroshima work. That was not something I created with the intention of people seeing the work. I created their own story. So the way I think about it in terms of how I created life studies versus my Hiroshima works, within me, it was a different consciousness in how it was created.
Thank you so much for this conversation. This has been wonderful. I'm curious for all of you, since there's been a significant amount of time elapsed between the beginnings and the showings of a lot of these works, if any or all of you want to comment on how your relationship to the pieces has changed over time as the space in between the conception and the moment of looking at it has expanded, especially for those of you who had many, many years between when you first created a piece and when it's come to light.
I'm happy to see them again. When Sayaka came over, I was pulling out work that I hadn't looked at in years. And so one of the pleasures is to realize that I still am fully invested in and stand behind work that I made a long time ago, because that's not always the case. Sometimes you pull something out of a drawer or out of a box and you're like, yeah, no. And as I said, that process of sort of looking at things over time was part of the germination of this work. So when you put something away, it's not always that it's like bad, right? But the time hasn't come, you know. And with the drawings, the first ones, it was too early. I was still in the middle of something else. And one of the other aspects that I really love about seeing, especially the big drawings again, is remembering how much time I spent in the dark, because it was, you know, the work of a photographer, right? Like they came out of the darkroom in a way. You know, I shot the film, processed it myself, looked at my own negatives, and then I had to draw them in the dark because I was tracing a projection. So, and that feels like a very comfortable space, actually. You know, anyone who's been in a dark room a lot knows what that feels like, right? You have your music on, the water's trickling, and the red light, and you can spend days in there. And the process of making these was similar for me, so it put me back in that mental space. It was really nice.
So to tell the truth, I don't have any message in the painting. No message. But I believe that art, let you to push the button or add buttons inside you. So I don't know what it is, but this is a chance to start something because of this show or because of this conversation. So I let you to go back to yourself and look for your button inside you. So this is what I'm doing. So in the process. And it happens the same for me. So when I show my paintings in the show, and thanks to you all, and I try to find my buttons inside me, and I start finding what kind of button I have, and I should be brave to press the button. So in this way, it happens. So thanks to this show, and always I think the answer comes in the future. So in the moment or in the process, I don't know what I do, for what, or I don't know. I don't have any answers. I don't find any messages. So, but once my paintings are shown in front of you, and I start to realize, oh, maybe this would be the answers, thanks to you. So, yeah, this is my answer.
あれですよね、撮った時と見せる時のっていうことですよね。時間が経った時で、ニューヨークで生活してる時はなんかいろんなことに腹が立ってたんですけど、で例えばなんかルームメイトと喧嘩して本当に腹が立って、そのルームメイトのことばっかり喧嘩したことばっかり考えてたんだけど、その時にね、ある方にそれはバカなルームメイトでよかったねと、そ の後々になってから本当にそのキュートだと思うことができるからって言われて、その時全然分からなかったんですけど、なんか今その写真をもう一回こうその13年前の写真を見て、あの時に本当にこの人とよく喧嘩したけどなんか愛おしいっていうふうに思うことができて、写真ってなんかそういうふうになんていうかその時は自分にとって良くないと思ってても何か後に返ってくるっていうふうなことを写真の力というか、でそれをまたもう一回自分でその編集して編むことでなんか別の物語にできるっていうのが私にとってはすごいこうなんて救いっていうかなんていうか写真に助けられてるなというふうに思います。
So when I lived in New York, there were many things that were very frustrating for me. One being that I had a roommate who I would fight with, and I would get really upset. And then at that time, I would just keep thinking about replaying the fight in my head of how I got upset with this roommate. And at the time, I confided in someone about this, and they said, it's good that you have this stupid roommate. That was their reaction. And it wasn't until much later that I realized, it became this cute.
バカだったよね。で、ルームメイトでよかったねって後でそれが親しみなんか可愛い。
I felt a little bit of intimacy, or it became almost like a cute thing. My way of thinking about it had changed, but at the time that was something I was not able to conceive of. But again, with these pictures, looking at them 13 years later anew, I really can feel that what that person said to me at that time is true. It's almost become a beloved memory. I can look back on it fondly, which I could not do at the time. And I do think that it really is photos that have the power to do that. At a certain time, something that was maybe not necessarily positive for you, it comes back in a different way. That really is the power of photographs. This time as well, going back to the photos and doing editing enabled me to create a separate narrative. It was a new story that I was able to create. So I'd say that for me, this was something that really rescued me. It was photos that saved me.
That's a beautiful conclusion. So if there's any other question, but otherwise, no. I think this was a beautiful way to end this, and I thank you so much, three of you artists, Aya, Asa, Marina.